El día de hoy vamos a entrevistar a una periodista que ha indagado mucho en algunos casos ocurridos en Tailandia. Ella es autora del libro La maldición de la tortuga y la verdadera historia de los crímenes de mochileros en Tailandia. A raíz del caso de Daniel Sancho hemos visto diferentes noticias y casos ocurridos en las islas de Tailandia y también en otros lugares de este país, y cada vez que queremos saber más, también desde España y otros lugares del mundo, hoy nos encontramos en nuestro canal con Susan Buchanan. Welcome, Susan. Thank you very much for coming on my program.
Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to speak to you.
Muchas gracias por invitarme. Es un placer hablar con vosotros.
Bueno, lo primero que tenemos que contar, antes de empezar con todo el meollo, con todo lo que vamos a tratar, decir que vamos a tener una traductora. En este caso es una suscriptora del canal que nos va a ayudar con esta entrevista. Lo que yo diga, ella lo va a intentar traducir del español a English, y de lo que dice Susan de English al español. Lo primero que te quería preguntar, Susan, ¿es verdad que tú estás vetada de Tailandia? ¿Que tú tenías una casa allí y que no puedes ni siquiera acceder a ella?
Hola, hi Susan. Martin asks if it's true that you've been vetted from Thailandia, that you have a house there, but you're not able to visit it because of the things that have been written about, that you've written about Thailand. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I left Thailand after 20 years in 2016. I didn't intend to leave forever. I was investigating the murders of Hannah Witheridge and David Miller, and supporting the two Burmese men that were accused of those murders. And I was writing extensively about corruption. And then 2 years after I left, they put out an arrest warrant for me, so I couldn't return home.
Sí, es verdad. En 2016 estaba escribiendo sobre la corrupción en Tailandia, el caso de David Miller y su pareja y el caso de los Birmanos. Y 2 años después, cuando fue de Tailandia en 2016, aunque había tenido ganas de volver, pues tuvo que emitieron un orden de arresto, y entonces no ha podido volver.
Claro, porque si tú vas a Tailandia, si tú regresas allí, te pueden meter en prisión.
If you go back there, can they put you into prison?
Yeah, there's an arrest warrant out for me, even though I've never actually seen a copy of it. But my lawyer confirmed there was an arrest warrant, and that lasts for 10 years. So if I went back, I'd be arrested as soon as I arrived on Thai soil.
Hay un arresto y hay un informe de busco y captura. No sé, eso es de busco y captura, como si ella vuelva, la mete en la cárcel. Eso dura durante 10 años, ese orden de busco y captura.
Ok. Susan, tú pasaste, creo que más de 20 años, según he podido leer, viviendo y trabajando en Tailandia. Y como tú ahora decías, en el año 2016 tuviste que verte obligada a partir hacia UK por tu propia seguridad.
So you were living for 20 years in Thailand, and in 2016 you were forced to move back to the UK for your own security.
That's basically what happened. I mean, I was very involved in reporting on the Hannah Witheridge and David Miller murders, and I was collaborating with international news organizations, and I was warned several times not to be reporting, not to be making Thailand look bad. But I was also supporting the Burmese Boys. I was going down to the prison. I was raising money for them. I was trying to help in their defense because I knew they were innocent. But interestingly, it was the deputy prime minister who asked for my arrest warrant to be issued over the rape of a young girl 2 years later. But it was Big Joke who actually issued my arrest warrant. So that's how I know that guy.
Básicamente sí, fue así. y ella estaba investigando estos casos. Me estaba visitando la cárcel donde estuvieron los birmanos. Ella dice que son inocentes, pero luego fue cuando ella estaba investigando un caso de violación a una chica, cuando el primer ministro pidió emitir el orden de la búsqueda, de búsqueda y captura, pero fue Big Joke, y que en este momento se encargó de todo esto.
Ok, Big Joke, también conocido por nosotros el caso Daniel Sancho, que fue uno de los crímenes actualmente más mediáticos en estos últimos meses. Pero antes de preguntarte por ese caso, yo también quería preguntarte por una cosa, un reportaje que nosotros sacamos por aquí, que fue el de los birmanos y algunas muertes en the Koh Tao Island. Why is Koh Tao called the Island of Death?
Sí, dice Martín que nos estamos interesados también en estos casos. Estamos ahora con el caso de Daniel Sancho. A ver por
Sale,
qué.
en inglés.
Ah, sí, perdón. Sorry, Susan. I've made a mistake. I've been talking to you in Spanish. We we're interested in all these cases that you were investigating, as well as Daniel Sancho. At the moment, we are investigating Daniel Sancho, but obviously the Burmese Boys and David Buchanan and his girlfriend, we're also interested in that, and we'd like to know why the island is called the Island of Death, Koh Tao.
I mean, Death Island came about because there was so many suspicious deaths on the island. I mean, it didn't start with Hannah and David. There's been numerous deaths before them, and there's been numerous deaths since then. And because there's been so much social media coverage of it and international social media coverage, someone just came up with the idea that, you know, it's Death Island. And I reported that people on social media were calling it Death Island, but the Thai people blame me for coming up with that nickname, but it wasn't me. I just reported on it. But I think it's quite apt because I've investigated 30 suspicious deaths on the island now, and it's a very small island. So you know, it's run by local families that are referred to as the local mafia. They're not really traditional mafia like Sicilian mafia. It's more of a tribal kind of mentality. But yeah, it's called Death Island because people just, you know, young backpackers just keep dying there with alarming regularity.
Porque ella estaba investigando 30 casos, que lo que sepa ella, de turistas que estaban, gente joven con mochileros, que estaban acusados de matar a sus parejas o gente, y que está nombrado Death Island por la cantidad enorme de casos que han habido. Ella estaba hablando de eso con la prensa, y también ellos acusaron a ella de llamar a ella la isla de la muerte, pero no fue ella, fue por las redes sociales, que empezaron todo el mundo a decir eso, por la cantidad tan grande de personas, de casos extraños, de muertes.
Claro, nosotros lo llegábamos a ver con el caso de Daniel Sancho, que empezábamos a escuchar lo de Death Island o Koh Tao, pero en Kopang Gang suceden también. Hay muchos crímenes sin resolver, sin resolución en la otra isla, en Kopang Gang, donde sucedió el crimen supuestamente de Edwin Areta.
Do you believe that in Kopang Gang there are also the same crimes going on, that it could be the same as Koh Tao? Because it's also run by these mafia people. Do you think that could be the same in Kopang Gang too?
Yeah, 100%. All of the southern islands are run by mafia, and they're all policed by the same police force. It's called Region 8. Region 8 take care of Surat Thani on the mainland, which is a town, and also the province, but they also look after Koh Samui, Kopang Yang and Koh Tao. And the people who live on Koh Tao, the Koh Tao mafia, they all originate from Kopang Gang, so they're all part of the same institution. I mean, there's several families, and they quite often fight between themselves for power and supremacy, but it's fundamentally all the same people.
Son la misma policía, la misma mafia, son como una mafia tribal, que son entre familias que se conocen por un lucha de poder, y la policía que funciona en Kai Tao son originalmente de Kopang Gang. Es todo entrelazado, vamos, que es todo igual.
Okay.
Y se llama Región 8, la policía que es por ahí.
Ah, ok.
Todo lo mismo.
Antes de empezar la entrevista, Susan nos estaba como contando que ella veía algunas cosas un poco extrañas en el caso de Daniel Sancho, sobre todo que quisieran cerrar tan rápido el caso.
Before the interview, you were commenting that you've seen some strange things on the Daniel Sancho case, that you believe that they want to close the case very, very quickly. So Martin would like to ask a few questions.
Yeah, that's fine. I think that whole case is highly suspicious. I watched some podcasts about it last night, and I just find the whole thing really strange, and I find it quite disturbing that Big Joke is saying this case is closed when it's not even been to trial. I mean, you know, what happened to innocent until proven guilty?
Ella dice que ella está muy preocupada que Big Joke está diciendo que el caso está cerrado cuando todavía no ha llegado ni a juicio, que se ve que lo quieren cerrar cuanto antes. No, se ve que esto no está siendo justo, porque cómo va a estar cerrado si no ha llegado ni a juicio.
Es tremendo eso. También nosotros veíamos que Big Joke hacía muchas entrevistas para las televisiones de España. No sé si dio una decena de entrevistas a las distintas cadenas públicas de España. Pero una de las cosas que a mí y a muchos nos llamaba la atención es que este surachate hackpunk Big Joke decía en una entrevista para la televisión pública o Daniel Sancho confiesa o va a morir.
What we're all very concerned about is the amount of interviews, the publicity that Big Joke has been giving to himself with all these interviews to the press on the television. But the one thing that's really horrified us is that he's basically said, or Daniel Sancho confesses or he dies. That's the thing that we just find most disturbing.
Yeah, it is really disturbing. But, you know, Thailand's got a big thing about their reputation. And if you make a Thai person lose face, which is another word for embarrassment, you know, they don't want to lose face. They're very reliant on their tourist industry. So if they can wrap up any criminal case quickly, especially if they can pin it on a foreigner, you know, it makes them look good and it makes the foreigners look bad. The Thais are relentlessly blaming foreigners for everything that goes on there. And Big Joke does think, you know, he's a huge celebrity and he enjoys his celebrity status. And part of my arrest warrant was that I was creating fake news. And yet, you know, when my arrest warrant came out, Big Joke was leading a team of policemen around Koh Samui looking for me when he knew I'd left the island 2 years previous. So he knew I wasn't on the island. He's on national television looking for me, knowing full well I'm not there, accusing me of creating fake news. So that might give you some insight into his psyche.
Bueno, Big Joke, ella dice una historia que cuando ella se había ido de la isla, 2 años después, Big Joke estaba en la televisión buscándola para salir en la tele, diciendo que ella tenía una orden de búsqueda y captura, cuando él sabía perfectamente que ella se había ido de la isla. Lo hizo para dar publicidad a él mismo, para parecer el buen policía investigando. Que en Tailandia tienen la fama de que quieren salir ellos con una buena cara. No quieren que nada ningún caso se ve en contra de su sistema. Entonces le llaman a él para cerrar los casos y para que todo parezca que ha sido culpa de los turistas, cuando realmente puede ser cualquier otra cosa. Pero él estaba en la isla haciendo programas de televisión para buscar a ella, porque había dicho que ella estaba haciendo fake news, cuando realmente sabía perfectamente que se fue hace 2 años, hacía 2 años que ella no estaba en la isla. Él lo sabía muy bien.
Tremendo,
Ella
tremendo, la
dice que
verdad.
eso te dice algo de cómo es él.
Ok, ajá. Antes hablábamos de policía, supuesta mafia, Cotao, Kopang Gang, que estaban regidas por la misma policía, mismas cosas que pueden llegar a suceder en estas dos islas tan turísticas del Golfo de Tailandia. Nosotros veíamos en diferentes reportajes que en Kopang Gang decían que había como 7 familias que controlaban la isla. ¿Es verdad esto? ¿En Kotao también sucede lo mismo? ¿La mafia está conectada con la policía?
Is it true that the mafia is involved with the police and that there are 7 families that run the islands?
Yeah, certainly the mafia run the police. I mean, the police are on very low salaries in Thailand, not enough to really survive. So the police take what's known as tea money. They take bribes, they take protection money, but the police basically do what the mafia tell them. I mean, in the mafia's mind, they were there long before any administrative bodies. Before tourists came along, they were looking after those islands. You've got the chiefs. Koh Tao has 5 main families. Kopang Gang has 3 or 4 main families, but they were running those islands and looking after those islands before tourists came, before the police came, before anybody came. So in their minds, it's their islands, they're in charge of it. So the police can only do what the mafia tell them. And also the police are very afraid of the mafia because they're more powerful. So if the mafia tell them to lose evidence or concoct evidence, then they'll do that because, they're reliant on them financially.
Ellos dependen de la mafia por dinero, económicamente, porque están pagados muy, muy salarios. Los mafias estaban en las islas mucho antes de la policía y las instituciones y los turistas. Entonces las mafias son los dueños de las islas. Entonces la policía tiene que hacer lo que dice la mafia para poder sobrevivir, porque si no sus salarios no llegan ellos a final de mes. Están todo coordinado a través de la mafia.
Brutal, brutal. Y Sally, ¿tú le comentaste lo de las 7 familias que supuestamente controlan la isla de Kopang Gang?
Is it true that it's 7 families, 7 mafia families that run Kopang Gang?
As far as I know, it's about 5 families that run Kopang Gang, but I've never lived on Kopang Gang, so I only really know the mafia families on Koh Samui and Koh Tao and on the mainland. But it's worth noting, as a foreigner living in Thailand, I learned very early on, if I had a problem, you never involve the police. You always go to your local headman or whoever you're associated with. Being okay in Thailand is reliant on having the protection of one of the families on the island that you're living on.
Basically, as far as she knows, it's 5 families. But she hasn't actually lived on Kopang Gang. She lived on the other island.
I think you should be speaking Spanish.
Sí, I think you're right. Que ella dice que, otra vez, me he equivocado de idioma, Martín.
Sí, nada, no pasa nada, Sally, tranquila.
que son 5 familias, lo que ella sepa son 5 familias que le llevan.
5.
Pero ella no ha vivido en Kopang Gang, ella ha vivido en la otra isla, no lo puede decir con seguridad, pero lo que ella
Vale.
sepa son 5. Pero ella aprendió cuando vivía en Tailandia que si tú quieres estar segura en Tailandia, tener protección, tú no vas a la policía, tú buscas algún miembro de una familia de estas mafias. Ellos son lo que te pueden proteger, no la policía. Porque ellos están encargados de todo. La policía solo hace lo que ellos dicen. Todo su dinero. Sí. Todo su dinero viene de ella. Todo el dinero que tiene la policía viene de las mafias. Su salario es poquísimo.
Caso Hannah Witheridge y David Miller. Condenan a muerte a dos birmanos por el crimen de dos mochileros británicos, dos trabajadores migrantes birmanos que habían sido condenados a muerte tras ser declarados culpables del crimen de dos mochileros británicos en esa isla de Koh Tao, esa turística isla tailandesa, en el 2014. Y sí que hay cosas muy desconcertantes en este caso para la gente que quizás no lo conozca o no haya visto otros reportajes que nosotros hemos hecho por aquí por el canal, y por eso quería traer a Susan on my program channel. Los cuerpos de los jóvenes británicos Hannah Witheridge y David Miller. Primero Hannah había sido viol, según los informes de la policía, y después David Miller, que había sido descubierto en septiembre del año 2014 en una playa de Koh Tao, que es una playa de las más turísticas de esa isla, del Golfo de Tailandia. Decían que estaban parcialmente desnudos y que habían sufrido lesiones graves en la cabeza. Sally, ahora si puedes preguntarle a Susan que cuándo ella empieza a investigar este caso y cuándo se empieza a adentrar en él.
When did you actually start to investigate Martin's just gone over the case of David Miller and Hannah and the Burmese guys, and wondered when you actually got interested in the case. When did you start getting involved and looking into that?
Straight away, as soon as it happened. I mean, I was running my own online newspaper at the time called the Samui Times, and I got a phone call to say that two tourists had been found dead on the beach on Koh Tao. And I investigated it straight away. The rescue teams in Thailand all have Facebook pages. So when they're called out to murders, accidents, fires, anything that's going on, they immediately post photographs to their Facebook pages. So when I got the phone call about the people being found dead on the beach, I didn't know which nationality they were. I just knew there were two dead people. And I was out at the time, and I went straight back home and fired up my laptop and went straight to the rescue Facebook page. And when I saw the images of Hannah lying on the beach, brutally murdered, I was really, really shocked because, it was just such a frenzied attack. And it was also on the beach that was owned by the main family that run that island. So I was like, wow, not only have two apparently white people been murdered, that they've been murdered on a very powerful mafia-owned beach. And I wondered, what kind of person would leave that kind of mess on a mafia-owned beach.
Ella estaba desde el primer momento, porque ella tenía su propio periódico online en ese momento. Entonces, cuando había un suceso nuevo, pues tenía un mensaje instantáneo a través del Facebook. Entonces,
Times.
Sí, entonces ella vio que había una pareja que estaban brutalmente asesinados de turistas en la playa. No sabía ellos, pero se fue ahí al escenario del crimen, y vieron que habían estado brutalmente, habían dejado dice que estaba muy brutal, muy violento. Y lo que le llamó la atención fue quién iba a hacer una cosa así en una playa donde la mafia son los dueños de la isla, que está todo controlado por la mafia, pero sin embargo alguien había dejado tanto sangre y había hecho un asesinato tan brutal que le llamó la atención. Fue un masacre.
Ok. Por este crimen tan brutal fueron acusados y posteriormente condenados a pena de muerte Zhao Ling y Wai Pio. Susan, ¿Wai Pio y Zhao Ling eran los culpables de este crimen?
Do you think that the Burmese Boys were guilty of this crime?
No, 100% not. They had nothing to do with it. Originally, they drafted in, there were only two policemen on Koh Tao at the time of the murders of Hannah Witheridge and David Miller, and obviously they drafted in more, but the police chief they drafted in to run the investigation was a man called Panya Mayman, and he initially said that it was members of the mafia family who killed Hannah and David, that he had video footage, that he had enough evidence to convict them, and that he was not going to allow any mafia to put pressure on him or his police force, that their decisions would not be swayed by anything the mafia did. And he also said he would not be using any scapegoats. And in a very short time, he was taken off the case. A new policeman was brought in. And it was over 2 weeks later that Way Pure and Zorlin were arrested. And like Daniel, if you've done something like that, why on earth are you sticking around on the island? Like, if I've committed a crime of that magnitude and I'm not from the island, the first thing I'm going to do is leave. So, no, I don't believe they're guilty at all. There was no DNA that matched Way Pure and Zorlin on the murder weapon. There were no witnesses. There was no CCTV. There was no motive. They had no previous criminal history. And, you know, they stuck around. So I've never believed they're guilty, not for a second.
Ella dice, bueno, 100% no eran culpables. Que en el principio un jefe de policía le llamaron porque solo había dos policías en la isla. Y en el principio llamaron un policía de otra isla para encargarse del caso. Y desde el principio dijo que tenía fotos por vídeo de seguridad que fueron 2 miembros de la mafia que habían matado a ellos, pero que luego que no iban a utilizar ninguna persona para tapar, vamos, como se dice aquí, cabeza de turco, y que fueron la mafia. Pero de repente le llevaron a él del caso y metieron a otro policía. Dice que no había nada de ADN, no había fotos. Y claro, la cosa que más le sorprende a ella, que los birmanos no se fueron de la isla. Que si tú haces eso, como en el caso de Daniel Sancho, no te quedes en la isla. Te vas a tu país lo más cuanto antes posible, o te vas de la isla. Pero no había ninguna pruebas contra ellos, en absoluto. La de ADN no había ninguno. Y estaban todavía por ahí. Ella está 100% segura que no fueron. Y lo más importante es que la policía que dijo que habían visto unos vídeos y tenía posibles pruebas contra dos de la mafia, pero que le llevaron del caso, le quitaron del caso.
Ok, ajá. Esto fue algo que sí que fuimos viendo, comentando en este caso, viendo por distintas noticias, tema de ADN, que no había ADN en la supuesta arma homicida. Tampoco decían que no había ni un solo testigo en este caso y que los 2 birmanos que no tenían nada de historial de violencia ni historial delictivo.
That's what drew our attention, that there was no DNA on the murder weapons. There was no DNA Burmese Boys anywhere near the scene of the crime. That they haven't got any violent history. That's what drew our attention to the whole thing as well.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is completely ridiculous. I mean, the boys are not even 5 foot tall. David was 6'2". The boys got up for work the next day. I spoke to their bosses. They both turned up at work as usual. They didn't have a mark on their body. They had no wounds on them. You know, when you look at the ferocity of the attack, I find it hard to believe that Hannah and David didn't fight back to some degree. And these boys, you know, are supposedly very naive 22-year-old boys from Burma, and yet they've got the psychological capacity to arrive at work the next day as if nothing's happened, do a day's work. There was no blood found on their clothes. There's no marks found on them. I mean, you know, to think they did this is just ludicrous. It's beyond ludicrous. And everybody living on the islands at the time, you know, we all know what happened. We just can't prove it. And everyone predicted they would arrest Burmese because they don't want to blame their own people for anything that happens because they'll lose face and look bad. But I mean, you know, I've been supporting the Burmese Boys for years. I used to visit them 3 times a week in prison. I've spoken to them. I know their families. I mean, it's, you know, there's no way those boys did that.
Ella dice que no hay ninguna manera que pueden haberlo hecho porque no había ninguna pruebas. Ellos solo tienen 5 pies de altura, los dos. Y David era mucho, 6 pies de altura. Era imposible físicamente que lo hicieron y que no tenía ninguna marca de violencia en su cuerpo. Y luego al día siguiente se fueron a trabajar como siempre, como si no hubiera pasado nada. Ella ha creído en su inocencia durante todos estos años. Todos los años que estuvo ahí se fue 3 veces a la semana a visitarlos en cárcel, conoce su familia, su madre y le da mucho apoyo. Dice que no hay ninguna manera que ellos lo hicieron, no había ninguna prueba y la estatura de ellos comparado con la estatura de David Miller es impresionante.
En el caso de Daniel Sancho, siempre nos hemos preguntado muchas cosas acerca del mismo. Yo quería preguntarte, Susan, tú que has investigado distintos casos de estas islas y ver cómo funciona todo, quería preguntarte si es posible que supuestamente pudiesen haber cambiado una escena de un crimen por otra escena y que agraven lo que supuestamente pudo haber hecho una persona para dar a entender un hecho más grave y dar por cerrado un caso.
We were just wondering about the Daniel Sancho case. If you think that it's possible, from the Thai point of view, to have changed the scene of the crime from one place to another, to make it look as if it was something totally different, because we have got the doubts that the crime wasn't even committed where they say it was just impolluted the next day. It was just, the whole thing seems as well ludicrous. We wondered if you thought it was also possible to have changed the whole thing, the whole scene of the crime from one place to another.
Yeah, I absolutely think they're capable of doing that. I mean, I was watching something about his case last night. I mean, for one, his bungalow, I mean, it was very close to other bungalows and they're only made out of breed block and then rendered. Excuse me. So there's no soundproofing. So if you're chopping up a human being, you know, and they're very echoey, the bungalows, because they're just made out of breeze blocks. So, you know, how could no one hear that? How could nobody see that? They said that he went and bought cleaning materials. Well, I mean, to hack up a body, it's going to take a long time to clean that bungalow. He's got to get the pieces out of the bungalow. I mean, in the whole 20 years I spent in Thailand, I never saw a fertilizer bag. So I don't know where that came from. You know, how is he finding the rubbish dump and you know, walking around with human body parts in bags and chucking them on the rubbish dump? I mean, it's not feasible. I would be not at all surprised if someone else had done it and they'd put a bit of blood and gore, you know, down his plug hole, and they said, oh, yeah, we found some hair and some blood, you know, in the sewage system under the bungalow. You can't even flush toilet paper in Thailand because the sewage pipes aren't big enough. So, you know, to me, it doesn't seem feasible. I don't know if he did it or not. I wasn't there. I don't know him. I haven't really investigated, but from what I've seen, it seems completely implausible that he could do that. And also, big jokes, or someone said that they confirmed that, you know, he died from a cut to the neck. Well, if he's in 14 pieces and they didn't find his head and his hands till days later, how could they possibly know that?
She doesn't think, ella dice que sería completamente imposible de cambiar el escenario del crimen. Y dice que la forma de las cañerías en Tailandia es muy débil, no se puede ni meter ni papel higiénico por la cañería. Y dice que sería muy fácil ahí o muy creíble pensar que el crimen se había hecho en otro lugar, que alguien había hecho un poco de pelo y un poco de sangre en el tapón de la ducha y cambiar el escenario del crimen y decir que se hizo aquí. Porque dice también que la construcción de los bungalows están hechos con bloques que se oye todo, vamos, con bloques débiles. Y entonces se escucharía todo. Dice que le ve muy poco probable que un crimen de esa forma se podría haber pasado en ese bungalow y no se escucha absolutamente nada con alguien cortando un cuerpo. Y ella dice que como ahí la construcción de las casas es de una forma tan débil que sería casi imposible meter todo, que no se veía, que no se escuchaba nada y que ella no sabe si lo ha hecho o no, porque no conoce el
Ok.
caso. Pero ella lo ve muy poco probable, como lo que están contando, y de cambiar una escena de crimen a otro, lo ve muy poco probable.
Vale, ok.
Poco probable, perdón, muy
Ah,
probable.
muy probable.
Sí, muy probable,
Ah,
Martín,
vale, vale,
perdón.
porque o sea, en toda la traducción me dijiste que lo veía poco probable, Susa.
Probable, quería decir muy probable.
Vale, o sea, entonces la pregunta que yo estaba diciendo de que sí podría ser ese cambio de escena, ella lo ve muy probable.
Muy probable, sí, muy probable y muy
Ok.
posible. Porque le ve muy poco, lo que ve poco probable es que que el crimen se hizo en el bungalow y que no se escuchaba absolutamente nada desde el otro bungalow, porque está muy cerca y las construcciones en Tailandia están hechas de una forma muy
Ajá.
débil.
Pero, ¿le puedes preguntar, Sally, también el tema del ADN? Que en un inicio se dijo que se había encontrado ADN solo de 2 personas en ese complejo hotelero.
What do you think as well of the DNA that they say they've only found the DNA of Daniel and Edwin, his victim, Edwin Areta, supposed victim. They've only found the DNA of 2 people in the bungalow. We can't understand that. There must be the DNA of a lot of people in that bungalow.
I don't think the Thais really understand about DNA. I mean, when the Burmese boys were fitted up for the murders of Hannah and David, they said that the DNA they took was 100% match. You know, the DNA from Hannah was 100% match to both boys, which is not possible because now it would be a mixed sample anyway. And when the defense team tried to retest the DNA, the laboratory said they'd lost it or used it up. I don't think the Thais have got any idea about DNA. I think that it's just a word they band about, you know, and say, "Oh yeah, it's a DNA match." It's then you know way out of any situation. I mean, that bungalow is going to have how many people? They don't clean them that well. I mean, the cleaner's DNA would be in there. The person who showed them around the room would be in there. You know, anything they've touched from a supermarket that someone else has handled when they put it on the shelf will have DNA on it. To say there's only 2 people's DNA in there is just completely ludicrous. It's just more rubbish from the Thais.
Sí, ella dice que los tailandeses no entienden de DNA, que tiene, que sí, ADN, que no lo entienden, que utilizan la palabra pero no lo entienden muy bien. Que es imposible que en ese bungalow no había ADN de otras personas. La persona que le enseñó a Daniel el bungalow, la persona que limpiaba el bungalow, la persona que le tocaba las bolsas del supermercado que compró Daniel, las cosas estaría ahí. Ella dice que no tiene ni idea, lo utilizan para parecer bien, lo utilizan como una palabra, porque no tiene sentido que solo hay el ADN de Daniel y Edwin ahí. Es imposible. Tiene que ser el ADN de personas
Ok,
ahí.
claro, porque esto también nosotros nos lo preguntábamos acerca de cómo puede ser que supuestamente varias horas después de que se haya cometido ese crimen ya supieran que eran Edwin Areta, una de las partes que se encontró en uno de los vertederos. O sea que el tema del ADN, que no nos podemos fiar mucho de lo que nos digan en base a esto y a tu experiencia con otros casos que has tocado como periodista investigadora en las islas.
So that's the thing that really attracted our attention as well, is that they said that they had found Edwin Arrieta, the so-called victim, a few hours after Danielle was arrested, when they hadn't even done a DNA test. So we assume then from your experience as someone living and a reporter over there, their method of doing DNA is just pretty useless, because we can't understand how they can have said only a few hours after after the incident happened that the pieces of body found in the rubbish dump were Edwin Areta, when he hadn't even had the autopsy, or no DNA tests had been done at that point. But they said they were 100% sure.
Thailand must pride themselves on having the most rapid DNA test turnarounds in the history of the world. I mean, you can't test DNA in 10 minutes. You can't even test it in 2 days. It's a long process, and it's never going to be 100% match. It's never going to be something you can convict someone on, because it's a probability. It's not an exact science, and the Thais don't understand this. I mean, when they took the DNA from the Burmese boys, who were later sentenced to death for murdering the British tourists, they said that the DNA came from them, but they can't prove that because there's no chain of custody. And their DNA samples were taken on the island after the last ferry left that day. So they kept the DNA samples in the fridge, and the fridge was in the bar that was owned by the mafia family that the first policeman said were involved in the murders. And the following day, it was sent up to Bangkok in a beer box. Within 12 hours, they said it's a match. You can't test DNA that quickly. It's preposterous, it's impossible, and it makes no sense. And there's no DNA testing facilities on Kopang Gang, and it's at least 8 hours to get those samples to Bangkok. So, do the maths. It's just rubbish.
Ella dice que Tailandia tiene que tener el proceso de ADN lo más rápido del mundo, porque es imposible tener el ADN en 10 minutos, como dicen ellos. Que cuando se mataron, con el caso de los Birmanos, le cogieron el ADN de los 2 Birmanos por la tarde, cuando habían salido la última ferry. Y luego la metieron las muestras en un frigorífico de un bar que los dueños eran la mafia. Y no estaban ni custodiados. Y luego le llevaron al día siguiente. Y en Kopang Gang no hay ningún sitio donde pueden probar el ADN. Tiene que llegar a otro sitio. Es imposible que pueda estar 100% seguro el ADN que ellos hacen en absoluto.
Es que es brutal, la verdad. Yo también quería preguntarte, Susan, que este caso lo seguimos mucho de Daniel Sancho, Edwin Areta. Hasta el momento se dieron como muchas causas de muerte. Y hasta el momento no se sabe cuál es la causa de la muerte del tristemente fallecido Edwin Areta. Primero se decía puñalada, luego degüello, y otras más que fueron saliendo a los medios de prensa, distintos informes de autopsia. ¿Podemos fiarnos realmente de los informes en estos casos? ¿De los informes forenses?
Can we really depend on what the forensics over there have said? Because first of all, they said he'd been stabbed. Then they said his throat had been cut. They're saying they don't know what the cause of death is. So can you really depend on their forensic people, their forensic investigation, which doesn't seem at all serious to us?
I would have more faith depending on a teapot made out of chocolate.
Ella tendría más fe en una tetera hecha de chocolate que sus pruebas de forense.
Ok. O sea, hablando del caso Hannah Witherich and David Miller, encontrados en Sire Beach, también tú, como decías, vi que ponías como una serie de pruebas, y una de ellas, ahora que lo recuerdo, era lo de que Hannah estaba agarrando un pelo rubio, que lo tenía como agarrado, que ni Zhao ni YPO evidentemente tienen el pelo rubio, ¿no?
We saw as well, Martin saw that one of the clues that you had when you were studying the case of Hannah and David was that Hannah in her hand had a blonde hair, that she was clutching a blonde hair, and neither of the Burmese boys had blonde hair. That's wondered what Martin, if that was true.
Yeah, that's true. She was found with the blonde hair in her hand, and they didn't do anything with it. I mean, there was also a condom allegedly on the beach because all rapists use condoms, right? That disappeared. There was a wine bottle that disappeared. The judge even said that there was no evidence in that case other than the DNA. It was 100% match, which is impossible. And that's why he convicted them. I mean, all the other evidence either didn't exist, was lost, or not referred to in the trial. So I managed to get hold of all of the prosecution files. I'm having them all translated. I've had their DNA tested, or their DNA tests reanalyzed in the UK by actual experts who know what DNA is. And I'm now waiting on samples from Wapior and Zorlin to be taken from the prison with a chain of custody to match them to the samples the prosecution used. But, there's three things in life you can be certain of. One is you're going to pay tax. Two is you're going to die. And three is if you're talking to the Thai police, then they're lying.
Ella dice que sí, que tenía un pelo agarrado en la mano rubio. Y ella ahora ha hecho unas pruebas de ADN custodiado y lo va a llevar para que lo hagan bien los análisis, porque dice que una cosa que puede estar seguro es que en tu vida pagas impuestos, te mueres y que la policía de Tailandia está mintiendo.
Ok. Yo también te quería hablar del caso de Singh Magna. No sé si lo he dicho bien. Quería preguntarte qué pasó realmente con esta persona, porque veíamos titulares de un británico huyendo de la isla tailandesa de Koh Tao, donde los turistas asesinados Hannah y David habían sido asesinados en Sire Beach. Este chico, Singh Magna, alegaba que estaba corriendo peligro su vida en aquel momento, debido a que decía que la mafia había matado a Hannah y a David. Él escribió muchos mensajes de texto diciendo que estaba huyendo de la mafia tailandesa, corriendo por toda la isla de Koh Tao.
We just wanted to know if you knew anything about the Sigma. Who is it? Martin, pronounce it again, sorry. What's his name? ¿Cómo se llama el chico? Que no me he cogido el nombre del chico.
Singh Magna.
Singh Magna, that he ran from the island after he saw the happening on the island, and he ran away from the island. Did you hear anything about him?
Sean McKenna.
Sean McKenna dice, ella dice de Sean McKenna.
Yes, this guy.
Yes, Sean McKenna. I've spoken to Sean McKenna many times. I mean, Sean McKenna was living on the island of Koh Tao. He was allegedly a DJ and a part-time scuba dive instructor, but his nickname was the Candyman because he was allegedly selling drugs on the island, and the mafia were chasing him around, telling him that he'd killed Hannah and David and that he was going to hang himself, and he was very frightened, and he put a message out on social media saying the mafia were going to kill him, and the Sky reporter actually tried to help him and they got him off the island, but he disappeared and fled to Milan. I don't know what he's doing in Milan or how he could afford to be in Milan, or what his involvement was, but he was a friend of David's. They met when David was at Leeds University, but Sean's from Scotland. He's, a bit of a shady character, but he said the mafia were trying to kill him, and he just left. But he's been very reluctant to speak to us or give us any information, despite the fact that when he did leave, his guitar was covered in blood, and he had injuries on his leg and on his arm, stab marks, which were identical to those that David had suffered. So I've always believed that Sean had more to do with it than meets the eye, 100%.
Ella dice que él puede tener algo que ver con esto, que lo que se puede pensar en un principio. Él era un disc jockey en la isla y pensaban que vendía drogas, le llamaban el Candyman por vender drogas en la isla. Entonces, pues él se fue corriendo de ahí diciendo que la mafia estaba detrás de él, pero se fue y tenía marcas en el cuerpo y su guitarra estaba cubierta de sangre. Se fue corriendo de Milán y ella no sabe por dónde está ahora, pero tenía muchísimo miedo de la mafia.
Ok, ¿no sabes? O sea, ¿se sabe realmente dónde está este chico? ¿Está desaparecido? ¿Acabaron con su vida? ¿O realmente consiguió huir de esa isla?
Yes, he managed to get away. He's in Milan. But she doesn't, he has been very reluctant. He hasn't wanted to talk about the case at all. He's very frightened of them. Que estaba en Milán
Ah,
y estaba muy preocupado. Tenía muchísimo miedo de que le iban a, porque estaba seguro que la mafia estaba detrás de él, está en Milán, pero no ha querido hablar sobre el caso.
ok, ok.
No sabe exactamente por dónde está en Milán.
También otra cosa que nosotros veíamos a raíz de estos casos, y ir viendo uno aquí, otro allá, que había pasado aquí, que había pasado allá, cosas extrañas en todos estos casos, había otro que era el caso de Joe Ferrari, un vídeo filtrado de un policía tailandés coaccionando y supuestamente tortura a un preso para sacar una confesión. ¿Qué pasó con este caso? ¿Qué pasó con Joe Ferrari?
Do you know anything about the case of Joe Ferrari, who was supposed, who was it? Is it true that he was tortured to get a confession? We've also Martin's also been looking into that case.
Yeah, I know a
Joe
lot about that
Ferrari.
case. Joe Ferrari, when I met Way Pure and Zorlin, they told me they were tortured into giving a confession, and they told me explicitly how they put plastic bags over their head and were punching them and suffocating them and threatening them. And then when I was filming a documentary for Sky Crime, the video was leaked from Thailand of Joe Ferrari and his guys torturing this alleged drug dealer in the exact same way my boys had described, when they could not possibly have seen that video. And yeah, he was later arrested because the guy they were torturing died. It's quite a graphic video, but Joe Ferrari's worth billions really. He makes a lot of money by through the luxury car industry. Allegedly, when people bring luxury cars into Thailand illegally, he seizes them, and then because they're there illegally or they've not paid the tax on them, they go to auction, and the policemen that have seized those cars get a percentage. And he had a garage just absolutely full of luxury cars. I've never seen any evidence of anyone importing luxury cars into Thailand. There's hardly any luxury cars in Thailand. So yeah, that's all completely dodgy. Yeah, I know a lot about that case too.
Sí, que estuvimos hablando sobre Joe Ferrari y cómo él y sus amigos de la policía mataron el narcotraficante. Y que Joe Ferrari lo que hace es, cuando la gente trae coches de lujo a Tailandia y no han pagado sus impuestos, él paga a la policía para llevar estos coches y tiene una colección de coches de lujo enorme. Y él hace su dinero así, mirando a la gente que traen los coches de lujo ahí sin pagar, poniéndole un precio muy alto, y entonces le lleva sus coches. Y entonces pues él estaba involucrado en en la muerte de un narcotraficante o supuesto narcotraficante en la comisaría en Tailandia. Y ella dice que cuando estuvo hablando con los birmanos, pues dijeron que habían estado torturados para confesar poniendo bolsas de plástico en la cabeza.
Claro, como que parece interesante observar esas técnicas de supuesta tortura utilizadas en esas imágenes filtradas que parecen como muy similares a las descritas por Zaulin y Waipio 6 o 7 años después.
That's what Martin drew the attention to, the torture methods for the confessions that you could see in the video, even years after.
Yeah, the Thai police routinely torture victims in order to get confessions from them. I mean, it's part of what they do. But I just found it really interesting that we've got video evidence of this torture going on in the exact way that Way Pure and Zorlin described years later, when they could never possibly have seen that video and they don't have access to the internet in Bangkwang Central Prison. So there's no doubt that the police, use these torture methods, because I've heard it from other people, not just Way Pure and Zorlin, and now we have video evidence. And Joe Ferrari went to prison, but I've heard he's been let out already. I don't know if that's true or not, but it wouldn't surprise me in the least.
Ella dice que el vídeo que se ha salido en las redes sociales con la tortura de este narcotraficante salió después de lo que cuando lo contaba la tortura de los birmanos, que es un método muy usado con la policía tailandesa. Ella la tiene confirmada por muchas fuentes, no solo de ellos, pero muchas fuentes. Ella dice también ahora que el Joe Ferrari, le han dicho que le han dejado salir de la cárcel. No lo sabe seguro, pero dice que no estaría sorprendido, pero que se le han dicho que sus fuentes han dicho que ya no está en la cárcel.
Ostras. A mí hay una cosa que me puso los pelos de punta que cuando lo vi, que eras tú besando a la madre, si no me equivoco, de uno de los birmanos y la madre llorando a mares y tú como creo que le estabas dando un beso, si no me equivoco. Tú hablaste con la familia de los birmanos, de YPO y de Zaulin.
That Martin says he saw a video of you giving a hug and a kiss to Burmese boys, and it struck him. He said, obviously, you got to know their family, and were very close to their parents.
Yeah, I know the mothers of both boys. In fact, unfortunately, Wei Pure's father died while he was in prison, and we had to go down to the prison and tell him that his father had died. Zorlin's father died when he was very young, but I spent a lot of time with the mothers. We found a safe house for them in Koh Samui. We paid for the safe house. We bought them food. I used to pick them up in my car and take them to the prison. I used to go to the temple with them. So I spent a lot of time with them. And when the boys were sentenced to death, the mothers, because they're very naive, really, when it comes to what goes on in courts, in the villages the boys come from, there's no electricity, there's no television, they don't have access to books. So they've never watched TV programs about corruption or courts or what goes on. They're very unworldly. They're lovely people, but they're not very worldly people. And the mothers believed they'd be taken out and executed that day. So they were absolutely hysterical. And it was just heartbreaking. I'll never forget the moment when, they were given the death penalty. It was just horrendous.
Ella le encontró casas seguras para la familia de los birmanos cuando estaban ahí. Le cuidaban bastante porque venían de un sitio donde no veían ni la televisión, que no tenía idea de los juicios, los cortes y de cómo iba la corrupción. Entonces le iban cuidando, le iban haciendo amistades y dándole cariño porque le hacía mucho falta. Y le llevaron a la cárcel con ellos y entonces sí le daba mucho apoyo.
¿Tú recibiste amenazas de muerte por investigar este caso?
Did you ever receive death threats for investigating?
I had lots of death threats. Yeah, I had a lot, and I had to even report some of them to the police in the UK. So yeah, I've had endless death threats.
Ella ha tenido muchísimas amenazas de muerte, muchísimos, y dos de ellas ha tenido que reportarlo a la policía en Inglaterra.
¿Y tuviste ayuda de las autoridades del Reino Unido?
Did you have any help from the English authorities?
Yeah, I did. The English police were actually brilliant. They were really good. They gave me GPS alarms. They gave me panic alarms. They gave me smoke alarms. They were all linked to the police station. They checked in on me to make sure I was okay. I lived in a safe house. But yeah, no, the British authorities were actually very supportive, even though I do believe the British authorities were complicit in covering up the Hannah Witheridge and David Miller case, because they sent some British police out to the island after the murders had happened, and they were given rights to oversee part of the investigation, and they wrote a special report about that. And during the trial, we requested that data from the British authorities, from the Metropolitan Police, and it was refused. And we took the Metropolitan Police to the High Court in London and demanded they give us the data and the information they held on Wei Pure and Zorlin, and it was refused. And Cressida Dick said we couldn't have it because it would damage the diplomatic relationship between the two countries. So I've got mixed feelings about the police, the local police where I live, that I'll never divulge where that is. They were very, very helpful, but the Metropolitan Police, with their involvement in the case, diabolical.
Ella, que la protegieron, le dieron una casa segura, le dieron pulseras y le dieron alarmas de humo, le dieron muchísima protección. Pero ella tiene más confianza en la policía local, de donde vive ella, pero nunca va a decir por dónde vive ella, claro, por su propia seguridad, que la policía metropolitana de Londres, porque ahí empezó a venir las relaciones diplomáticas entre Tailandia e Inglaterra, que aunque la policía inglesa se fueron a cubrir el caso, que le dieron la posibilidad de ir a cubrir el caso de los birmanos, pero al final esas pruebas que ellos consiguieron no lo admitieron, porque habían problemas de destrozar las relaciones entre Tailandia e Inglaterra. Entonces tiene mucho más confianza en la policía local de su pueblo que lo de Londres.
También a raíz del caso de David Miller y Hannah Witheridge, vimos que había como más casos de turistas como Ben Harrington, Nick Pearson, Christina Annesley. Claro, realmente, bueno, estos turistas, que hay muchos más casos que también hemos hablado de ellos, evidentemente dejaron a sus familias en sus casas totalmente desconsoladas cuando estos turistas fueron a hacer este viaje a estas supuestas maravillosas islas tailandesas. De alguno de estos casos que he nombrado, Ben Harrington, Nick Pearson o Christina Annesley, por ejemplo, ¿es verdad lo que se decía? ¿O se cerraron en falso estos casos?
Do you believe that the other cases, Nick Harrington, Martin's mentioned the names Nick Harrington, Ben Pearsley, I think he said, the other cases of tourists over there who've been involved in these cases, do you believe also all these cases are closed too quickly and it's all been a cover-up basically?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ben Harrington, I know his mum, Pat, she's a nurse, very high up in the nursing profession, and he was found dead, having fallen off his motorbike, driven his bike into a concrete pole, apparently. They did a roadside autopsy and said his neck was broken. When his body came back to the UK, his neck wasn't broken. They tried to cremate his body straight away, but his mum, Pat, made sure that they didn't do that. His brother, Mark, was on the island, and they managed to get his body back to the UK. And his money was missing when they found him. So, yeah, I completely believe that was dodgy. Nick Pearson, I know his parents very well. They were on Koh Tao for New Year's. He was found dead in the water on the 1st of January 2014. He'd fallen down 50 feet of rocks with, there's huge boulders going up to his bungalows. And they said, oh, maybe he was sleepwalking, but he had no broken bones. His death, that's completely not feasible. The description the Thais gave for that are rubbish. I mean, Christina Annesley was found dead in a bungalow owned by the man who was arrested initially by Panya Mayman for the Hannah and David murders. And I know her dad, Boyne, extremely well, and he doesn't believe any of it either. They tried to say she died of an overdose of antibiotics and tramadol painkiller, which again is just complete rubbish. But we know that she was going to be a journalist or wanted to be a journalist, and she was asking questions about the other murders on the island. I mean, I could go through another dozen, but no, they're all highly suspicious and badly investigated.
Son muy, muy suspiciosos todos, porque el primero, ella conoce las madres y los padres de todos. El primero, la madre enfermera, entonces el chico supuestamente se cayó de la motocicleta y se chocó contra la pared. Y hicieron una autopsia al lado de la motocicleta en la carretera mismo. Dijeron que había roto el cuello y se había muerto por eso. Pero ella con la ayuda de su hermano que estuvo en la isla, la trajeron a Inglaterra y le vieron cuando hicieron la autopsia que no tuvo el cuello roto. Entonces, eso no fue la causa de la muerte. El otro, pues no me acuerdo el nombre, pero se dice que se había muerto en el agua.
Nick
Y
Pearson.
Nick Pearson, que se había muerto en el agua, pero no tenía ni una marca en el que dijeron que había estado sonambulando, pero dijo que había muchísimos sospechos en el caso. Y la otra chica que se murió, pues ella
Christina
estaba
Annesley.
sí,
Mm.
ella estaba entrenando a ser periodista y cuando la muerte estaba preguntando muchas preguntas a las autoridades sobre las otras muertes, supuesto en este momento.
Tremendo, tremendo, la verdad, todos estos casos.
Y conozco más casos.
¿Hay alguno que en especial, Susan, a ti te llame la atención y creas que seguro se cerró en falso?
Do you, is there any particular case that draws your attention that you are sure that they've been closed too soon? Any
All of
particular
them.
case?
I mean, all of them. I mean, I've done a documentary with Sky about that. I mean, Sky missed out a lot of quite vital information from that documentary. I've written a book about it, The Curse of the Turtle, the true story of Thailand's backpacker murders. I mean, Ben Harrington, Nick Pearson, Hannah Witheridge, David Miller, Hans Peter Suter, Dimitri Povs, Christina Annesley, Luke Miller, Valentina, Elise de la Magne, a Belgian girl. I mean, they're all just wrapped up and the tourists are blamed. I've looked into all of them. I mean, my biggest case obviously is Hannah and David, because to this day I support the Burmese Boys. I send them money, I write to them. The proceeds of the book go to them. I've just funded, independent DNA testing for them. I mean, I'll campaign for them until they're free. But I mean, I'm interested in all of these cases. But my main focus now is finding justice for the Burmese Boys, because they spent 9 years in prison for murders they had nothing to do with.
Su caso principal es los Birmanos, pero dice que todos los casos, ha nombrado muchísimas personas, están cerrados en falso. Por eso ha hecho un documental con Sky, que Sky también no emitió muchas de las pruebas cruciales que ella piensa haber puesto. Sobre el caso, ha hecho un documental, ha escrito un libro, está ahora en una asociación que ha hecho ella para dar dinero a la familia de los Birmanos, porque está convencida de su inocencia, está haciendo campañas, no va a parar hasta que salgan de la cárcel, porque llevan 9 años en la cárcel por un crimen que no hicieron ellos, ellos no son culpables. Entonces su principal causa es esa. Pero dice que todos los casos de los turistas están cerrados en falso, y por eso ha escrito el libro, su documental.
Y dice que no va a parar hasta sacar de la cárcel a esos 2 birmanos.
No, you're not going to stop until you manage to get the Burmese boys out of prison. Obviously, you're not going to stop.
No. I'll never stop. And once I prove those boys are innocent, I'm going after the police for all of these botched cases. The investigation was appalling on all of them. In the case of Christina Annesley, the police identified the last man to be seen with her in their bungalow, didn't even bother to speak to him, and her father had to track him down himself. So, once I prove the boys, the Burmese Boys, Waipur and Zorlin, are innocent, then I'm going after the entire Thai police force, because this is not acceptable. And, if you're hosting international tourists, then you've got to do better than this, because it's a joke, it's not acceptable, and it has no place in 2023, 2024, or any year that comes after that.
Ella no va a parar hasta que salgan de la cárcel, pero dice que después de que salgan de la cárcel, que va a seguir, y cuando eso, pues después va a ir por detrás de la policía entero de Tailandia. Dice que no es justo en estos años 2023-24 que esto está pasando, y de que es absolutamente inaceptable en hoy día que eso puede pasar. Y de que otro caso, Christine Wellesley, dice que dijeron que habían encontrado un testigo vital y al final la policía ni siquiera lo vio y no, él era el padre de la chica que tuvo que ir detrás de este testigo.
Ok. Yo vi que en algunas datas de Tailandia tenía como una supuesta tasa de condenas penales del 99,3 o 99,4%, según un estudio académico de Estados Unidos de David Stegfuss. Decía eso, ¿no? Que esa tasa de Tailandia de condenas penales del 99,3%, según ese estudio. ¿A qué crees que se debe eso?
He asked what that the perdona Martín, es que no he entendido muy bien la pregunta. 99% de los casos hechos que son, ¿cómo se le pregunta?
Sí, o sea, quería preguntarle a qué cree que se debe eso de ese estudio académico de Estados Unidos de que Tailandia tiene una tasa de condenas penales del 99,2%.
What do you believe that was a study done in America about 99% of the cases that happened in Thailand? Did you see the study? Do you know anything about what do you believe about this study?
I believe it's correct. And let's face it, in Thailand, there's no jury. When you go to court, there's no jury. There's just 3 judges. Corruption is rife in that country. They are all money hungry. I mean, predominantly Thai people are very decent, but people in power are very money hungry. They're very power hungry. And yeah, most people who are arrested are found guilty. In fact, if you ever want to get out of prison in Thailand, if you've been accused of a crime, the best thing you can do is plead guilty, because they'll halve your sentence and the king gives amnesty. Pleading innocent is just going to, see you spending the rest of your life in prison. Thailand's all about who you know, who you can pay under the table. It's wildly corrupt. And, anyone who's even using drugs in Thailand keeps money in their car. So if they get caught, they can just pay the police off. So I have absolutely no faith in Thai justice. I don't believe there is such a thing as Thai justice.
Ella le cree 100% el estudio, dice que es totalmente verdad, que todos los crímenes en Tailandia están controlados por las mafias, que los narcotraficantes llevan siempre dinero en el coche por si paran la policía con la droga, pues la tienen dinero para pagarle a la policía y ya no pasa nada. La mejor cosa que puedes hacer en Tailandia es decir que eres culpable, porque si no te van a dar la sentencia de muerte y buscar a alguien para poder pagarle. Que la única manera de salir de todo, cualquier embrollo que te metes en Tailandia es pagando. Buscando la persona correcta y pagando, que es todo corrupción.
Nosotros desde España que seguimos el caso Daniel Sancho Edwin Arrieta, si realmente por un casual, ahora vemos que Daniel Sancho ha confesado uno de los 3 cargos que se le imputan. Para la gente de España que bien lo sabe y también de Latinoamérica que nos sigue, Daniel Sancho confesó haber hecho supuestamente la ocultación del cuerpo de Edwin Areta. Realmente, si Sancho confiesa los cargos que se le imputan, ¿podría aún así no ser culpable?
Is it possible that Daniel Sancho, what has happened is he's confessed of it to just one of the crimes that they've given him, the actual hiding of the body. Is it possible that even though he has he's actually said that he's innocent for these other crimes and guilty of the chopping up of the body, that he could actually be innocent even though he's being accused of being guilty? What do you think about
possible. That? It's possible. They're completely capable of concocting evidence, and that doesn't make sense either, is it? I didn't kill my friend, but I chopped him up and hid his body. I mean, it sounds absolutely ridiculous to me. But one thing you need to know is that he will never be executed, even if he's given the death penalty, because they could only execute people if the death penalty is current in their own country. So he'll be given the death penalty and then they'll commute it to life. But I mean, yeah, I mean, can they concoct all of this evidence and make it up 100%? Do I know if Daniel's innocent or guilty? Absolutely not. I couldn't tell you either way. I don't know enough about the case. But if you're asking me if it's possible that they've pinned this on him and he had nothing to do with it and they forced him to confess, it wouldn't be the first time and it certainly won't be the last.
Ella se cree que lo más probable es que él es inocente o que es posible que es inocente y que le han hecho una trampa, que le han hecho una trampa, que todo es todo una que le han inventado toda la policía, que eso sería muy posible. Ella no sabe si él es inocente o culpable porque no conoce bastante el caso, pero que es posible que él es inocente y que todo eso es unas mentiras de la policía, muy probable, que no sería la primera vez ni la última vez, que sería muy probable. Pero ella del caso de Daniel no lo conoce bastante en profundidad para decir si es culpable o inocente a ella.
Ok, claro. Ok, Susan, vamos a dejar por aquí lo que es este programa y esta entrevista. Así que te hemos robado más de una hora de tu tiempo para contar estos casos, también hablar un poco de Daniel Sancho a raíz de esos casos de los birmanos que tú has investigado. Y lo último, bueno, darte las gracias, muchísimas gracias, thank you very much for your time, for participating in my program channel.
You're more than welcome.
Ahí decimos, no, de nada. Ahí está muy contenta.
Tell Daniel's family the best thing they can do if they've got lots of money, which I believe they have, is just pay them off. It's the only way. It's probably too late now, but if there's an opportunity to pay, because that's the only way he's going to get out.
Ella da un consejo a la familia de Daniel, que si pueden, que la única manera de salir de esta situación es pagando. Que lo que tienen que hacer es buscar la persona correcta para pagar y pagar. Si no es demasiado tarde para eso, porque la justicia ella no tiene mucha confianza en eso, que paguen.
Sally, ¿puedes decirle que me gustaría otro día poder continuar hablando con ella o haciendo más entrevistas, porque seguro que nos quedó muchísimas cosas de otros casos y también del caso de los birmanos, que es gigante, para poder hablar con ella?
Would it be possible to do another interview at some time, Suzanne? Because Martin's sure there'll be lots more to talk about.
I could talk to him about this for 1 month without taking a breath. So yeah, absolutely. Just tell him to drop me a message and we'll speak again. And thank him for, bothering to investigate these cases, because I've done lots of interviews and, he seems to really know what he's talking about, which is unusual. So well done on his investigation skills.
Ella dice sin problema que ella podría hablar de estos casos durante un mes sin parar, porque hay tantas. Y que dice que muchísimas gracias para indagar tanto, porque hay mucha gente que le entrevistan pero no muestran tanto interés que tú. Y que ella dice que le estás haciendo un labor muy bueno, investigando e intentando llegar a la verdad.
¿Hay algo que podamos hacer como para ayudar? O sea, ¿hay algo que desde aquí, desde este canal, esta comunidad que nos ven cientos de miles de personas al mes, algo que podamos hacer para ayudar, por ejemplo, a esos 2 birmanos que si no fueron los culpables?
Is there anything we can do from the community that lots of people watch our channel, thousands of people? Is there anything that we can do to help the Burmese Boys?
Yeah, I mean, you can promote my book because it's available on Amazon, because all proceeds go to the boys, and just keep getting the word out, appeal for witnesses. Maybe people were scared to talk in 2014, but maybe now they're not so scared. So anyone who's got any information, anyone who's heard anything. We're always looking for new leads. And anyone who wants to, donate to the boys, they can get in touch with me or just buy the book, really. So that they don't get much in prison. They don't get enough food. They don't get fresh water. They don't get medicine or toiletries. We have to send money for that, and it costs a fortune. So anyone who wants to help can either buy the book or contact me directly, and I'll tell them how to get the money into the prison. They don't send it to me. They can send it to the prison.
La mejor forma es comprar libro, porque todas las ganancias del libro va directamente a ayudar a ellos, porque en la cárcel no tiene medicina, no tiene buena comida, no tiene nada en la cárcel, todo es pagando. Entonces todo lo que ella coge de su libro, todas las ganancias van directamente a su ayuda. Entonces la mejor manera es promocionar libro, comprar libro y cualquier otra ayuda que le contacte directamente con ella.
Okay, so Susan, thank you very much for
You're
your time.
welcome. Take care.